Hey guys, welcome to the dating game with Troy Francis, myself, Troy Francis, dating coach for over a decade. So today we're going to be talking about how to improve your life by creating great habits. Okay. And this is something that look, I was incredibly late to the party as far as the book Atomic Habits by James Clear is concerned. I only just read it. Years after everybody else. But it was fantastic. It was a great read. I think I would encourage everybody to read it. I think you should all get it and consume it, listen to the audiobook, get it on Kindle, get the paperback, whatever you want to do, because it's got some really, really great tips and advice in there. And it really breaks down, the fundamentals of habits. And look, it's been said, hasn't it? We are the sum of our habits. Okay. So if you want to achieve certain things in life, if you want to be a certain sort of person, if you want to have a certain type of existence on this planet in the short time that we've got here, what's going to affect that? Well, what's actually going to affect it is or are the habits that you undertake. Okay, the habits that you consistently perform. Now, this could count for dating. Okay, because a lot of dating coaching, to be honest, is getting people to break old bad habits and implement new better habits. But of course, it also refers to things like fitness. It refers to eating and nutrition and diet. It refers to sex, success, business, work, career, all of these different things, right? Because when you break it down, everything that we do, everything that we achieve is based on these granular, small habits. Okay. And so we have to look at the detail. The devil is in the detail, right? And we have to look at our habits and we have to think about, okay, well, what is serving us and what is not serving us. And one of the big problems with human beings, and this is made very clear in the book. I knew this from myself from bitter personal experience, but we tend to like to take the easiest path possible. Basically, it's a human instinct. We don't want to, and it's a biological instinct that makes sense because we don't want to make too much effort. We want to receive the good things in life or what we perceive to be the good things in life, the dopamine, let's say, with minimum effort. So, for example, you can get a dopamine hit from drinking excessively and going out and partying, or you can get a dopamine hit of a different kind from creating a meaningful piece of work, like maybe sitting down and writing a short story, an article, making a video, uh, learning to play a musical instrument or something like that. The difficulty, though, is which is easier? Well, it's easier to get loaded on a Saturday night than it is to learn to play the violin because in learning to play the violin, it's going to take you longer. There's going to be this learning curve. You're probably going to suck at the beginning. You're probably going to suck for quite a long time before you start to get better. And the time lag that there's going to exist before that dopamine hit kicks in is going to be greater. Okay, it's also the same thing actually with dating, bringing it back to the main topic of this channel, right? So guys, we will encourage guys basically to go out and just socialize and talk to women and extend their social circle and become more proficient in social skills. Okay, the issue with that though is that it's quite difficult because when you start, if you're rusty, if you are somewhat introverted, if you find it difficult to talk to strangers, then you are gonna probably struggle to some extent because you're gonna go into situations you're maybe not quite gonna know what to say. Maybe you're not gonna conduct yourself as well as you could. Rejection is part and parcel of this thing anyway, so there's likely to be rejection. You're gonna feel bad about yourself, and then it's gonna be like, "Oh no, woe is me. Why didn't I just go to the pub instead? Why didn't I just have a few drinks?" And I would have got that hit, that dopamine hit much more easily than doing the thing that was more difficult. But of course, in the end, what value do you really get from going out and partying on a Saturday night? You wake up the next day, you have a hangover, you feel like crap. Okay. Whereas if you do the more difficult thing, which is, as I say, maybe learning to socialize better, it might be writing a book, it might be exercising, whatever, then although it's a slower burn, the value of that is better. So we need to train ourselves in order to commit to habits that are going to give us better outcomes in the longer term, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I think that makes sense, right? So, Atomic Habits by James Clear is a very good book to read or to listen to, because he really breaks this down and he really explains it in very sort of granular detail, and actually gives some very practical advice that you can put into practice about how to make changes in your life that are actually going to be meaningful. And I think for all of us, and I include myself in this as much as anybody, this is so important, okay? Because if we want certain outcomes, we have to change up what we do. Okay, there's no two ways around it. Okay, if you look at your life, if you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I'm just not where I want to be. Okay, then clearly whatever you've been doing up to this point hasn't been serving you. Okay, because if it had, then you'd be up here, and you're not. You're here. All right. So you need to look at the fundamentals. You need to look at, okay, what am I doing? What am I doing that's serving me, and what am I doing that isn't serving me? All right. And then you need to switch those things around. So one of the first things that James Clear says in the book, I've got a number of points that I'm just going to go through. This obviously doesn't summarize the entire thing, but there's a few of the key points that stood out. One of the first things that he said is that small incremental habits can make a very big difference. Okay. And I believe that to be true. I've always felt that. I think it's better to do a small amount of something rather than nothing. Okay. So, some days you might wake up and you might feel ill or you feel crap and you don't really feel like exercising. In my opinion, and I've always felt this, it's better to at least go to the gym, even if you only do like 20 minutes, or you go on the bike, you do 15 minutes, and then you finish. Okay. It's better to have done something than to have done nothing. It's the same if you're doing content creation. Okay. It's better to create a short piece of content. It's better to shoot, a short video that may not be your best work, but at least you've done something. At least you kept that momentum going. And the other thing as well is that with things like content creation, with things like exercise, and also with things like socializing, with talking to women, often you don't know how it's going to go until you start. So you begin the activity. Like I've had this with exercise. I get up, I'm like, Jesus, I just don't feel like this today. I'm not feeling it. I'm not in the mood. And I start working with my trainer and we start doing this stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is just, I'm not feeling this. And then by the end of the session, it's like I'm on fire. And I was like, this is fucking amazing. I'm so glad that I did this. Okay. The same thing can sometimes happen with socializing, right? It used to be I would go out in the evening, go to the bar. I would talk to different women there and so on. And, sometimes I really, really wouldn't feel like going out. I'd be like, I just want to be at home. I just want to be watching something on TV. I don't want to be doing this nonsense in this loud kind of Larry pub club environment. It's I'm not feeling it. And then you get into a really amazing conversation and suddenly you're in the flow and suddenly you hit that social momentum and everything's going great. Okay. So that's another thing to bear in mind. You don't really know until you start how you're going to feel. Same thing goes for writing. Okay. Sometimes I can sit down, if I'm writing a book or I'm writing an article, sit down in front of the computer and start work. And again, you're like, yeah, I can't really be bothered with this. I'm not feeling it. And then somehow it just flows. Okay. That's somewhat unpredictable. You can't guarantee that's going to happen every time, but it does happen quite frequently to me, actually, that I'll start doing something. I won't be sure how well it's going to go. And then actually it does go pretty well. Okay. So you can surprise yourself. So that's the first thing. But what you need to do, of course, is to start doing the thing in the first place. Okay. You need to make a start. And one of the things that James Clear talks about in the book, which I think is good advice, is really chunking the habits down to the most minimal points. So, for example, if you want to run a marathon, right? Running a marathon is difficult. Okay, you want to train to run that marathon. Okay, so what's the first thing that you have to do? Well, you have to go out and start practicing running. Okay, but before that, what do you need to do before that? Well, the very first thing is you need to get up, you need to put on some clothes, some running clothes, and you need to put on your running shoes. Okay. So what James Clear, and I think this was an anecdote that he describes maybe from someone he worked with or in the book, but he basically said, the person made it there that the initial habit was not right. I'm going to go out and run for 50 minutes. The very first habit was I'm going to get up and I'm going to put my running shoes on. Okay, that's the first thing. Okay, so again, you're chunking it down. So that habit, getting up at 8 a.m., putting on the running shoes, okay, that's a small thing to have to do, but it will then presage you actually going out and taking the action. And once you've done that thing, it's much more likely then that you're going to go and do the next thing, which is leaving your apartment and going out into the street and then starting to run. Okay. So you can break these habits down into these kind of micro habits. I guess, hence the title Atomic Habits, right? You break it down to these atomic habits, which are interrelated, and one then leads to the next. Um, and that's going to get because what you need to do is kickstart the engine. Okay. And this is actually with the dating stuff, this is what a lot of guys find very difficult, because we might say to a client, he wants to meet women, he wants to meet a girlfriend. We'll say to him, okay, well, why don't you go out and talk to, you know, 7 new women this week that you haven't met before? And they'll say, "No, I can't do that. That's so daunting. It's so terrifying. I could never ever do that." And you say, "Okay, fine. Well, why don't you then just go up to 7 people that you've never met before and ask them for directions?" Okay? Or if you feel a little bit more confident than that, you could maybe compliment them. You could walk up to 7 attractive, or just 7 women, and just say, "Hey, listen, you look really stylish. I had to come over and say so. Anyway, have a great day. See you later." Okay. It's a small thing. It's a much smaller step to have to climb than going in and being, some kind of Riz Lord, where you're chatting her up and you're coming out with all of these wonderful Shakespearean lines, and then you're getting her phone number and you're romancing her and all the rest of it. Okay. It's a much smaller step. But in doing that, in going out there and talking, just opening the conversation and talking to people, firstly, you're going to get more comfortable with that process. And secondly, as I said before, what might happen, just organically, is that you meet somebody and she just likes you and she's just keen to have that conversation with you. She's keen to extend the conversation. She's like, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm just, thank you very much. I'm glad you like my style. I'm actually visiting from Denmark. What about you? Are you from London?" And then you say, "Yeah, I'm from, London. I've lived in some different places." And then suddenly you guys are in a conversation, and maybe that could lead to a date. You don't know. But the only way that would have happened is by putting yourself out there in the first place. And so when you want to do something that is in itself overall seems quite daunting, you want to break it down to those micro habits first, okay, in order to get yourself kick started. So it might just be as simple as, right, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go and sit in my desk. I'm going to make a coffee. I'm going to go and sit in my desk, and I'm going to turn the computer on, and I'm going to turn Word on. Okay. And I'm going to open Word, and I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm going to open up Word, and I'm going to start writing, and I'm going to write the first sentence. Okay. And you break it down. And then once you've done that, it's like, well, okay, well, I might as well kind of carry on now because I've started. And so then it starts to build on itself. Okay. And then this magical thing, which we all want in all of these areas of life, which you could call momentum, or you might call it flow state, starts to kick into play. I've experienced flow state in many areas. I've done it with videos, I've done it on podcasts, I've experienced it in writing. I've also experienced it in socializing and in dating. Okay. When suddenly you're just in the flow, you're in the moment. Okay. And it feels like nothing, you can do nothing wrong. Okay. But to get there, you have to start. All right. And so it's making the starting as easy and as attractive as possible. Okay. Hope this is making sense so far. Um, what have we got next? So the next thing that he talks about that is important is, rather than trying to, what you need to think about is the person that you want to become. Okay. And you want to build the habits around the identity. So you start off with, all right, this is who I want to be, or this is what I want to accomplish. Okay. And then you take a step back and you think, okay, so if I want to be that kind of person, what are the sort of habits that that person will have? All right. And then you want to start doing those things. So you go backwards rather than saying, okay, well, I want to be a great writer. So I'm going to write 60 pages, 60 words, not 60 words, 600 words every day. Okay. Instead, what you might say is, okay, I want to be a New York Times bestseller writer. Okay. That's the goal. That's the identity that I require, that I want for myself. all right, so what would that sort of person do? Well, obviously they would write a lot. They would probably read a lot. They would probably read, contemporary work and work from the canon and so on and so forth. They would spend time honing their craft. So then you've got, okay, so these are the kinds of things. And then you can do the old thing of like reading biographies and autobiographies of people who've been successful in the field that you want to get into, and look at what those people have done, and then start to emulate that. And then it's a question of like, okay, so this person who became a very successful writer, he used to get up at 5:30 a.m. every morning and he would write 1,000 words. Okay, maybe I can do that. That sounds like a bit of a tall order. So how am I going to make that easier for me? And another thing that James Clear talks about is sort of, I think he refers to it as, is it chunking habits? But he refers to it as sort of putting habits together. So the first habit might be something relatively pleasurable, like making a coffee. Okay, so that might be the first thing. It's like, right, I'm going to get up 6:30 a.m. I'm going to make a coffee, which is nice, which is a nice thing. I enjoy that. And I'm going to drink the coffee, and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to open the computer and I'm going to write the 1,000 words. Okay. So the first habit is making the coffee and drinking the coffee. That's fine. That's easy. That's quite fun. That's something you enjoy. But then you associate that habit with the next habit, which is the actually doing the work. Okay. And then after a while, the two habits become almost interlinked. So that's just what you do. It's like, well, I get up, I have a coffee, and then I do the writing. Okay. So linking habits together can be a very powerful thing to do. So, it might be, again, in the dating situation, it might be you say, okay, well, what I always do is I leave my house and I go out and I always have a conversation with the Uber driver who's driving me into wherever I go out. And then when I go into the bar, I go and have a conversation with the first attractive woman that I see in that bar. Okay. That's just what I do. That's just the habit that I have. Okay. It doesn't mean that that conversation is always going to lead to anything. It doesn't always mean it's going to be successful, but it does mean that you've instilled a habit. Okay. And then once you've done that, what you'll probably find is, okay, well, now I feel more social. It's not the end of the world. She had a boyfriend. So what? It doesn't really matter. Now I can go and talk to other people and I feel much more comfortable. Okay. So interlinking the habits and associating habits together is very, very powerful. Um, and he talks about cues and then craving and then rewards and then the response to those rewards. Okay. And fundamentally it breaks down as, look, in order to create good habits, okay, you want to make them seem attractive. And that's the big thing. And like I said, if it's something worthwhile, unfortunately, because of the way we're wired, if it's something worthwhile, it tends to seem less attractive. It's less attractive to me to say, right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a 70,000 word book, even though ultimately that may well be more satisfying, but that's sort of, in the short term, that's less attractive than it is to say, okay, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to party. All right. So again, you're using these cues, you're using these interlinked habits to make the harder thing seem more attractive. Okay. And over time, what happens is well, as the name habit suggests, it becomes habitual, right? It becomes easy. But this is about getting yourself there in the first place. And the second thing is you need to make the bad habits seem to be unattractive. Okay. So, he talks about the book about smoking by Alan Carr. Easy Way to Quit Smoking, I think it's called, which I actually read last year because I was smoking a little bit last year. I read that book and it really helps. It really works. I stopped, I hadn't smoked for years. Stupidly, I kind of started smoking a little bit again and then I stopped and it was great. And I put it down to that book. And, one of the jobs that that book does is it makes smoking seem to be very, very unattractive and actually a very, very pointless thing to do. Okay. So you associate negative habits with things that are you make them seem bad, you make them seem unpleasant or not pleasurable or destructive. Okay. And you instead incentivize yourself to implement habits that ultimately are going to create better outcomes in your life. As I say, with all of this stuff, we're kind of battling human nature a little bit because it's such a tricky one, right? Because when you think about it from the dating perspective, yes, there are plenty of guys out there who will come and ask advice and they'll say, yes, I want to meet an attractive woman and I want to have a nice girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll say, okay, fine. But in order to do that, you're going to have to socialize with a bunch of women. All right. Now, yes, maybe you're using the apps, but you're still going to have to go on a load of dates. And if, ideally, you want to be doing it by also going and talking to people in real life. And then all of a sudden, the enthusiasm starts to falter. And the reason is they want the end game, right? They want the bit at the end, which is she's in his apartment and they're kissing and making out and whatever. Like, they want that bit, but they don't want to have to go through the difficult bit at the beginning, which is having to have the chutzpah to go and walk up to her and maybe get rejected and maybe deal with some social anxiety and so on and so forth. So we need to find ways to make those initial bits easier, okay? One of the things I always tell clients as well is you've got to keep the end game in mind. You've got to have a very strong why, okay? So, and again, I suppose this goes back to James Clear's thing about, what sort of person do you want to be? Well, if you want to be somebody who has a successful dating life, whatever that looks like for you, then you've got to think, well, what would that person do? Well, probably he's gregarious and he goes and talks to lots of people, okay? Probably he practices his social skills. Probably he's somebody who, has worked on his wit and his eye contact, his body language and his look and his fashion and all of those kinds of things. And then you've got to think, well, am I doing those things? And if I'm not doing those things, how can I incentivize myself to do those things so that I can create positive changes in my life? Anyway, I hope you've got some value from this. I think the book Atomic Habits, James Clear, very, very good. Highly recommend it. Check it out. And please do subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the notifications bell. Give me a like on the way out. And in the comments below, just let me know what you think of this subject matter. And if there's any other things you'd like to see me cover in future videos around dating or around some of this mindset type stuff. And I'll see you guys again very soon. Bye-bye.